long as okay. All right. UFC Vegas 45, Charles Jourdain versus Andre. What was the highlight? Yeah, I just saw that. I didn't know he was the highlight. Mr. Highlight. I'm sorry. Andre Mr. Highlight Ewell. I don't really like it, but it's his name. Our question to you guys with this matchup. These are two guys in the featherweight division with kind of mediocre UFC records. You have Charles, who has a 2-3-1 record, 2 wins, 3 losses, and a draw. And then you have Andre Ewell, who is 4-4. So both guys are pretty similar in number of fights experience in the UFC specifically. I think it's an interesting matchup for that regard because they're both you're kind of like at a crossroad, I guess, with both of these guys. So can one or the other separate themselves? So it's not just do they win, but do they win in a decisive enough way where it's like, okay, this guy should be moving forward and this other guy maybe not that we get rid of him, but maybe he's closer to getting out. So what's your take? Which one can kind of separate themselves out from the other? My answer is kind of probably biased because I like watching Charles Jourdain fight. So my answer is going to be Charles Jourdain. But I also would add it's not just because there's a reason I like watching him fight. He's very entertaining, and that air it's appropriate for him to be called Air Jourdain because he makes it exciting. You know, he's got 11 wins and they're all finishes. So he's not like just getting decision victories. He's a very entertaining fighter to watch. I like seeing what he does. He's creative, he's crafty. But we saw against Julian Erosa his last fight, which we'll touch on, where some of his downsides are. So my pick is that Charles Jourdain will kind of be able to separate himself out. And I think if he does win, which is my expectation, that he will add on to that 100% finish rate.
Yeah, I agree. I think Charles Jourdain is probably going to pull ahead in terms of, which fighter is going to have that, that standout performance. And it's not a knock on Ewell. It's more of a praise for Jourdain. So, I mean, I could go into it, but we have another section for that, so I'll hold off on that one.
Yes, we will. So let's just take a little bit of a dive. We'll start with Charles on the last few fights coming into here. So again, like mentioned, 11 wins. They're all by finish. He's got eight knockouts, 3 subs. He's only been finished 1 time, and that was the last fight yet, but it was against Julian Erosa, which was right there. Even before the sub, though, Charles was not looking great in that fight. I believe he was the favorite of that one, if I'm not mistaken, on the betting lines. I had picked him on like 7 parlays, and he lost, obviously. And I think, if I'm remembering, I think it was around minus 160, and I thought that was pretty appropriate for that fight. But he was like flat. And I credit to Erosa too. He was kind of able to fuse him, so to speak. Before that, he had Marcelo Rojo, finishes him. He had a draw against Josh Coulibaly, which I don't quite remember that matchup. And then a split decision loss against Andre Fili before that. And then you see there, Doo Ho Choi, he finished him as well. So for me, like we said, both records for these guys are kind of similar. They're almost both around 500. You have 2-3-1 for Charles. You have 4-4 for Andre. I feel like for Charles, it's kind of misleading. We talked about it with Angela Hill. You see 13-10, and on the surface, you might think, oh, this fighter's not good. Same thing with Charles. You see 2-3-1. And if you think on the surface, thinking, oh, he's not that good, isn't unfair because it's not a nice looking record. But again, I don't think it's very indicative of the fighter. That's why, again, part of my pick to separate himself out, because I think he's much better than his UFC record indicates. I don't know. That's kind of what we're seeing with him in the last few. Is there anything from the last few that you kind of remember sticking out to you about him?
No, but I did want to point out that
maybe the record.
No, but I did definitely want to point out that I think he needs to win. I don't think it needs to be a finish. I think he needs to win decisively. So even if this goes to decision, it needs to be very clear that he won the fight. In my mind, and probably the UFC's mind, to have that stand out look to it. Because if he kind of gets to the decision without it being very clear, 30-27, then I don't know what you do at that point.
Yeah, because again, you have a draw, a win, and a loss.
Yeah.
Your last three specifically, so you've alternated every possible outcome you could have. Uh, I agree. I think again, even if it's not a finish, it has to be a very clear cut victory, bordering domination. I would say for him to kind of continue that, not to continue to really start ascending, I should say. So let's take a look now on Andre's side. Um, He's on a 2-fight losing streak. He lost to Julio Arce. His last bout, he got finished by him. And then he lost to Chris Gutierrez before that. And if I'm not mistaken, that Chris Gutierrez one, he did not look good in that bout. If we pull up the numbers on that one real quick, if we click that Usman Burns, I want to make sure I'm remembering the right one because I remember thinking, who's this Gutierrez guy? Because he's just making a pretty... Yeah, 69-59 is closer than I'm remembering, but and it was a 30-27. If you look at the scorecards,
Where
right
can I
above it.
find the
There we go,
30-26?
20. That's what I'm remembering. There was that one judge that scored it 30-26. I think this was one of those where like, how the hell do we have one judge score it 2-1, two score it 3-0, and one scores it a 10-8 in there?
Yeah.
So. And then before that, he had won 2 times in a row. And then again, that 4-4 record, it's pretty accurate because he's like alternated a win with a loss, and then he won twice, and then he lost twice. So not much consistency from both of these guys. But again, especially now that we're on Andre, not much consistency from him either. So it's kind of hard to get reads on these types of guys. As fans too, you want to try and gauge like, so how do I? Is he going to win? Is he going to lose? And especially on the UFC side too. So, like, what do we do with these people? You've had 8 fights so far in the UFC. I don't know, like, what's the consensus on Andre Ewell? I don't even, like, my answer is I don't know either.
On that note, I think Jourdain will make this decisive victory, especially considering, Ewell's last couple of losses. When you take into consideration he got knocked out when he was matched up against Arce, and when you take into consideration that he did not perform against Gutierrez, my assumption would be that Jourdain should be able to sort of moonwalk this into a victory. I also want to point out that there's a 7-year age discrepancy between the two, with Andre Ewell being 7 years older than Charles Jourdain. So does that come into play?
26 to 33.
Yeah, so does that come into play? Does it not? On the flip side of that discrepancy, there's another massive discrepancy in their reach. There's 5 inches, I believe, between the two of them. 6 inches. My apologies. 5. Like as if 5 inches wasn't enough. There's a 6-inch reach discrepancy in favor of Ewell. So does that come into play? Does it not? I don't know. Neither of these guys really have much to do on the ground, although if you could see it right there on the stat board, Ewell's had at least some ground experience, but I don't think it amounts to much. But it's really hard for me to not pick Jourdain in this situation. I think he's definitely the one with a more sort of faster trajectory.
Yeah, and I think bringing up the age is a good point too. So I think that maybe bolsters our point of picking him as the trajectory being the answer to that initial question we asked. I didn't realize there was that big of an age gap between the two. Not that 33 is old, but 26 is pretty young.
Yeah.
So you can gamble a little bit more when you're 26. And I think we kind of see that in the finish rate. So we mentioned 11 for 11 on finishes for Charles. Not bad on Ewell's side either, though. Of the 17 victories that he's got, 11 of them are by finish. 7 are by knockout, 4 are by sub, and Charles has 3 submission victories of his own too. So 7 submission victories between the two. I wouldn't expect this to be decided by that either, like you were mentioning. But the ability is there for both guys. They've proven it a few times that they can do it. So let's look at the we said who our pick is. So the odds. Minus 200 in favor of Jourdain, plus 170 for Ewell. Honestly, I think this is dead on for me. I think 2-1 for Jourdain. I think it's appropriate. I 100% agree with the line.
It's kind of hilarious how synced up we are. Like we didn't talk about this in advance to anybody. So just so you know, we didn't discuss this. So the fact that you're saying that, and I have it right here, line set appropriately. So there you go.
That's funny. I mean, I think this is what happens when we put bets next to each other for so long.
Yeah.
the amount that we put, the amount that we know our tendencies and stuff, I guess, and in conjunction with how last week too was going. Yeah, I mean, again, we've covered. This is the fifth and last fight we covered for our previews here. We for sure said the Lewis and I was gonna say Daukaus. The Lewis and Daukaus fight was fairly appropriately placed. This one I say is spot on. Did we say one more wasn't that bad? No, it was just these are the two.
These are the only two.
So we both say Jourdain. Over under, I expect would be set at 2.5. Again, if in case the other videos we've put out, you guys haven't had a chance to check out. We couldn't find the rounds on any of the sites. We're recording this 5 days out from the event, so I would assume it's going to be set at 2.5. Given that Charles is a 2-1 favorite and all of his victories are by finish, it makes me wonder if the under on the 2.5 is going to be a favorite. My prediction will be that the under will be a favorite, but a slight one, maybe like minus 130 on the under, the over being plus 110. And I would say, regardless of what the line is set on the over under, I think the play is the under regardless. So Charles on the under, I think, is a pretty good parlay to put on, just like a little 2-leg, maybe put like 30 to 50 on it. I think it's not a bad play. Yeah, so this is Ewell, right?
Yeah, this is Ewell.
So looking at that last 4, the last 5 was under 2.5 for Ewell, but then before that he's got 3 straight decisions, and then he lost to Cheeto. I've asked this before, so is that 3 minutes 17 seconds into the round?
I think that's into the round.
17.
I think that's
into the round.
Yeah, I think that hit the over on a 2.5.
Yeah, so that means 4 of his last 5 fights have gone over 2.5 for Ewell. Well, actually, you could say 5 of them. He goes over. Ewell's. I keep wanting to say 5 of the last 6, and then it was 6 of the last 7. Ewell usually has been going over of his last few fights. And if we look at Charles, because we didn't again mention 11 for 11 on the finishes, but when is he finishing these fights?
Set it at 2.5. He'll be finishing under. I mean, he'd be finishing 1.5 under certain circumstances, but those were years ago.
If we scroll up a little bit, if we look at the UFC one, so UFC, he lost on the over 2.5. He won on the over 2.5. He drew, so he went over there. He lost with decision, that's an over, and then he won on the under 2.5, and then he went. So I'm actually probably going to be wrong then. So of his 6 UFC fights for Jourdain, all but 5 have gone over 2.5. So never mind. I would then assume, given that, even though he has 11 finishes, given his UFC record, that the over is probably going to be the favorite. So
yeah, and that's why I started looking, because when you said you would go on the under, I kind of started scratching my head internally. I'm like, wait, let me double check something, because I was thinking 2.5 and on the over. But it wouldn't surprise me if Vegas set the line with the under as the favorite.
Really?
That wouldn't actually. Yeah, looking at this, that still wouldn't surprise me. Because I don't know, they do weird shit, man. And I don't know exactly how they do it or what they do, but part of me, and this is completely emotional, guys. This has nothing to do with logic here, but part of me feels like we could potentially see an early KO. Or TKO rather, or both, who knows? So it wouldn't shock me. I'm sure there's a little bit of like black magic that they put into coming up with the numbers. So if they consider stuff like that, then, I can see it set with the under as the favorite.
I think even looking at this, seeing how both guys during their UFC tenure are going over 2.5, I'm still sticking with Jourdain on the under as a good play because of
on the over.
I think because it ties with what we've been saying.
You meant on the over.
Yeah, I'm sorry. What was that?
You said Jourdain on the under. Did you mean on the over?
No, on the under. I'm sticking with on the under.
Oh, okay. Maybe so your original
maybe the over is going to be. I'm changing my tune on which will be the favorite.
Got it.
Now I'm assuming they'll probably have the over as the favorite. Maybe like around minus 160, minus 170 on the over. But I think the under is a good underdog play if it ends up being the underdog on that, because of what we said already. The initial question was who separates themselves out. I think Charles does. We said he's a younger guy. He's 7 years younger, 26 to 33. I think to be able to separate yourself out, you got to have a nice decisive victory. Continue that 100% finish rate. I think he does. I think he does it under 2.5. I'll even go as far as say it'll happen in the second round. I'm horrible with those proclamations, but I'm going to put it out there.
Overhand right.
Second round finish. I'm etching it in stone. The second round finish for Charles Jourdain over Andre Ewell. Send me your betting tickets if you lose. I won't compensate you. Anyway. Yeah, so we'll see. This is, again, the fifth one we're covering. Very excited. This, I was about to say maybe also a possible candidate for fight of the night, but that will be contrary to me saying it finishing the second round. So never mind. But still, I think should be an entertaining fight. I expect Charles to really come out there and prove it. Charles, don't prove me wrong. I've heard all my eggs are in this basket, as they were last time when you let me down. So just saying it one more time.
So just to reiterate for everybody,
Charles.
yeah, just to reiterate, the question here was considering both these guys seem fairly even in terms of their records on paper. Which do you think is going to separate themselves out more? Is it going to be Jourdain or is it going to be Ewell? And let us know. Yeah,
and then who your pick is. Are you thinking this goes the distance? How a lot of these, or is it going to go over 2.5? Because a lot of their fights are going beyond that. Anything else in between that you feel may or may not happen in this fight? Trajectories, whatever. Take your pick. Let us know. We want to hear.
And smear our faces all over social media. Talk about how casual we are. Thank you.
Yeah, that's true.